On the subject of gender, I'm making this video while these thoughts are still in my head. I was thinking about putting this off, but I kind of want to do this while everything is fresh in my head. I am making this uh, to address some of the communication problems between trans people and the rest of the world, because there's a lot of pushback and arguing kind of about the whole idea of transgender, and a lot of that has to do with the definition of gender. Now, I am not going to try to convince anybody of the real definition of gender, what it really means, because it is in fact just a word, like all words, and which is to say that definitions are malleable. Definitions of words change over time. Uh, this is not meant to be a what's that phrase? End all, be all. This is what gender means, sort of thing. But I'm going to talk about gender and what I mean by it, like when I'm using it in discussions. I think the first thing to point out is that when I'm talking about gender, I'm talking about something distinguished from sex. That a person can be male or female, and that is referring to their sex. But gender is something else. What is it exactly? It's a difficult question to answer. My first encounter with gender that I remember was from Latin class back in high school. That was the first time I think that the word gender was really kind of used on a regular basis, because Latin is a gendered language. And what does that mean, that Latin is a gendered language? It means that the language words are divided up into masculine and feminine and neuter. The concept of gender is not necessarily having anything to do with sex in that case. Saying that a word is masculine does not mean that the word has a penis. So just for an example, the word for farmer in Latin is agricola, and it is a feminine noun. So you can tell that it's a feminine noun because it ends in the letter A. And the letter A is the designation of a feminine word. Does that mean that farmers are feminine people? I don't know what the reasoning was behind designating farmer as a feminine word. It could be that because farmers were kind of seen as being non-combatants, that they were not warriors, they were somewhat passive, resigned, compared to Roman citizens, I guess. But the word poet, also poeta in Latin, is a feminine noun. Does that mean that poets are feminine people? Possibly, that's what that means. I'm trying to think of a masculine noun. So the word for man is a masculine noun, but that doesn't really help here. But that was my first encounter with gender. And so, when people say things like, remember the good old days when there were just two genders? I'm like, no. In America, maybe we have no concept of the three genders, but in ancient Rome, that was their view. There are three genders: masculine, feminine, and neuter. But their concept of gender applied to the entire universe. Now, it could be that they got this concept of universal gender from religion, religious views of the world. There is a, if you've studied religion, you know that gender is a part of religious. What's the word? Cosmology. Say like in Taoism, you have yin and yang, which is a gendered view of the universe, which is to say that the entire universe can be broken down into masculine and feminine parts. In that particular case, there are only two genders. There is yin and yang, but it applies to the entire universe. So, for example, brightness is masculine and darkness is feminine. Dryness is masculine and wetness is feminine. So these are the gendered aspects of the universe itself. This is not mean that light has a penis and darkness has a vagina. That's not what that means. It does not mean that darkness has ovaries or breasts or any of that stuff. That's not what that means. Now, that may sound condescending, but I'm trying to get that point across that gender in this case is not the same thing as sex. There was also a religion that's not too well known. I did not hear about it until I was in my 30s, which is Hermeticism, and there are 7 tenets of Hermeticism. One of them is that the entire universe is gendered, which is to say what I just said, that the entire universe can be broken down into kind of masculine and feminine parts, that there are things which kind of have their equal and opposite, such as light and dark, dry and wet, expansion and contraction, inhale and exhale, these sorts of things. So that when I talk about gender, that is more what I'm talking about now. But how does this apply to transgender people? That is a question that I am still answering. When I first came to the idea that I was trans, I didn't understand it. It did not make sense to me. What made me think that I was trans is how I felt. So my entire life, I was unhappy. I was miserable. I constantly felt like something was wrong. I constantly felt like I was not situated in my own being correctly. I felt like if my body is a chair, my soul was not sitting in my chair comfortably. If you've ever been in a chair for a long time and you just can't get comfortable in your chair, that's kind of how I felt in my own body, that my soul was trying to sit in my body and it just could not get in the correct position or whatever. And so my life was basically a life of pain. And, I've tried several different approaches to try to deal with that pain, one of which was drugs and alcohol. The other part was studying religion. And I came upon the whole transgender thing, I think, from seeing transgender people and hearing their stories and this kind of thing. And that was how I kind of started exploring in that direction. And so of course I ended up, when I say exploring in that direction, what I mean is basically going and buying women's clothing, makeup, and wigs, and trying it on. And that kind of what I might call my discovery was discovering how I felt when I saw myself as a woman, which was to say that I felt better, that I started to relax, that it was easier to breathe, that I was more situated in my body. My soul was more situated in my body in a comfortable kind of way. And that it was kind of like one question was answered, but it just opened the door to many more questions, because it was kind of like, well, if I'm a woman in a man's body, what does it mean to be a woman? Uh, you know, and that was, let's see, that was probably 5 or 6 years ago that I kind of made that discovery, which didn't happen necessarily all at once, but it's still, I'm still looking for the pieces to the puzzle. I'm still trying to understand this, to find myself, and that's partly because I'm still in pain. I'm still struggling. I'm still the world still knocks me over very easily, and I feel like I just don't have a foundation. So I'm looking for the foundation of myself, if that makes sense. Trying to get myself into my seat, so that my seat kind of becomes a throne, if that makes sense, where I don't need people to tell me who I am. Or if they do try to tell me who I am, I don't have to listen to them. Because that is kind of one of my biggest problems, is that people, if someone tells me that I'm a piece of shit, either literally or figuratively or with their actions, that's what I see. I see, oh, I am a piece of shit. And it was kind of how I felt my entire life. So putting on a dress for an occasion didn't fix that. And so there is that question still. Like I said, if I'm a woman in a man's body, what does that mean? And how does that pertain to my happiness? And what do I need to do about it? Do I need to wear nail polish? And if I do, how does that, why wouldn't wearing nail polish help? These sorts of things didn't really make sense to me. And if I were a woman in Africa, would wearing nail polish help, or would I have to dress as the women in Africa dress? And if I lived in a nudist colony, what would I do in a nudist colony about this? And would wearing bras and panties in a nudist colony help me if, no one else is wearing bras and panties? These are the sorts of things that I didn't quite understand. I don't quite understand. But yeah, I am still looking kind of for what what the real me is, if that makes sense, and how that pertains to gender. Like if someone were to ask me, what does it mean to be a woman in a man's body? Right now, I couldn't really explain that, and that's kind of what I would like to be able to do. Uh, you know. But at the same time, like I can't, even in my own head, conclude that the transgender idea is the right idea for me to accept now, because there are other valid ideas about gender, I think. And when I say valid, I don't mean true. I just mean that they are kind of worthy of consideration. Now, one of them that kind of stays in my head constantly, or that I'm kind of constantly kind of comparing, if I'm weighing options, there's another option to the transgender idea that I weigh, which is Carl Jung's idea that all men have a feminine side, which he called the Anima. And according to him, a man cannot attain to his highest potential if he does not get in touch with this Anima. If he does not get in touch with his feminine side, he will kind of remain a immature, undeveloped man. And that, I can't say that that's wrong. I can't say that that's not true. I constantly think that that could be true, and that could pertain to me. That I am a man, not a trans woman, who just has a feminine side, this anima, or whatever you want to call it, which I don't say that I can't see it if it exists. The only thing that I know for certain is that seeing myself looking like a woman makes me feel better. That is the only thing that I know for certain. But like I said, I am still in pain. I still feel like I don't see myself entirely, and I'm not yet quite situated in the seat of my being. Still, so those are kind of the two competing ideas that I hold on to. One is that I am trans, which basically just means I'm a woman in a man's body, but that, like I said, doesn't entirely make sense to me. And the other is Carl Jung's idea, or it's not entirely his idea, because a lot of people, I don't know if he came up with that, but I got it from Carl Jung. The idea that men have a feminine side and women have a masculine side, which is true in his theory. This is true for all people, all human beings. This is not some people have this and some people don't. This pertains to everybody, in his opinion. Which I don't know if that's true. I don't know that all men have a feminine side. They might have feminine thoughts or whatever from time to time. I don't know if that means they have a feminine spirit kind of haunting their being. But yeah, that is kind of, when we're talking about gender, that is kind of in the vicinity of what I'm talking about, at least, and I think most trans people are talking about. If you were to say that a trans woman is not a woman because they don't have XY chromosomes, you're not talking about gender. You're talking about biology. You're talking about sex. And what does that have to do with gender? Now, people do conflate gender and sex quite often. I've seen plenty of job applications or other sorts of forms, like official forms, where they ask for your gender, and the only two options are male and female, which, like I've said, for me, male and female pertain to sex, not to gender, but that is common. But that, of course, like I said, is not what gender originally, I shouldn't say originally, but that's not, in the broader picture, that's not what gender means. Like I said, it did come from civilizations before ours. The ancient Romans, the ancient Greeks, the ancient Chinese. It's even in the Bible. They're not quite as obvious. In the story of Genesis and the story of the creation of the universe, God creates the universe in a gendered way. He separates light and the darkness, which is to say that light and darkness were at one time together as one thing, and split them apart into basically opposites. And the whole 6 days of creation proceeds in this kind of gendered way, but it's not said specifically in that story that this is gender. Yeah, so now I think I can leave that for a while, or at least for this video, and just go on to say that in our society, most people, whether they realize it or not, already have this idea of gender. To kind of illustrate what I'm talking about, in our society, it is a common view that having a penis doesn't necessarily make you a man. And you hear this quite often, whether people will acknowledge that this is about gender or not is a different story. But how many times have you heard someone say he's not a man, or he's not a real man, or she is the man in the relationship, or these sorts of things? That's talking about gender, right? That basically means that having a penis doesn't necessarily make you a man. And it's the same with having a vagina. It doesn't necessarily make you a woman, though you don't really hear that too much. It does come up, but not quite as often. I think the the concept of manhood, especially, is more prevalent, or more in the kind of common discourse, that a man's manhood can be questioned is basically proof of this idea of gender that I've just described. That this idea that you can have a penis but not be a man. That being a man is more than just having a penis, if that makes sense. And if it's more than having a penis, then what is it? It's your It's your behavior. It's your values. Like being a coward is considered to be unmanly. Wearing colorful clothing is considered being unmanly. Buying a fruity drink at a bar is considered unmanly. Clearly, being a man is more than just having a penis. And, I think most people kind of subscribe to that. But then when you say that gender is a social construct, or gender, is not the same thing as XX and XY, then all of a sudden people are like, no, they get bent out of shape, and they're like, that's not, you don't know what you're talking about or whatever. But it's all over our society, whether people realize it or not. And I think just the fact that you have words like manhood, and that manhood couldn't be questioned, I think is basically just, like I said, it's just evidence of what I'm talking about. Unless you want to say that all males are men, that having a penis makes you a man, then, and we're going to do away with this idea that, a man who wears a dress is not a man, or whatever, just because he wore a dress once, which is, something that it's an idea that you see, or I've seen. Just imagine this. Ask yourself why most men are reluctant to wear dresses. I'm making this video after making my video on the Dave Chappelle special. Dave Chappelle did mention in an interview with Oprah once that he refused to wear a dress once in a movie. He was making a movie. I forget what it was called, but the producers or the director asked him to do a scene where he wears a dress, and he refused to do it. Now, why would he refuse to wear a dress for the purposes of being in a movie? Because if people see him in a dress, that could mean that he's not a man, right? People might question his manhood just because he wore a dress once in a movie. Why else would he refuse it? If wearing a dress once means that you're not a man, then gender obviously is not tied to having a penis. So I feel like I'm beating a dead horse at this point. I think I can stop there. I think I've gotten it across. Kind of what I mean, at least when I'm talking about gender, even though, like I said, I'm not entirely sure how it pertains to what is inside of me. When I say like that, if I am transgender, or if I'm a woman in a man's body, I am not entirely sure exactly myself what that means. This is one of the reasons why I am taking hormones at the moment. I just started the estrogen regimen recently, and I am doing that partly to answer questions, because I don't understand this entirely, but it is kind of vague for me as to how gender pertains to, or how the inner self kind of relates to gender, and what does it actually mean to be a woman if a male can be a woman. at least on the inside. So yeah, just because of my own confusion, I like I said, I don't mean for this to be a definitive exposition on what gender is. I guess it's more what gender is not. See you.